welcome everyone. Our first show and tell. So for those that don't know me, I'm Fraser Trickett, the product owner for this round. Working with Unboxed obviously on this and the other councils that are kindly listed at the bottom on there. Could you move me on to the second slide, please? So just to give a bit of background, what we're focusing on for this round here is the technical feasibility of moving forward with creating a repairs online service. We feel that from the discovery in Alpha that we've got a really good understanding of a common service pattern and how that might work. But what we want to understand from this is how we can actually start to make this a reality. And we're approaching this from two different channels. And that is either that we can help evolve the market as it stands and work with some of the main suppliers that are out in the market and implement and integrate with them, or influence their development so that it fits in with what we believe would be a best of practice, or actually to start to disrupt that market and to see how we can change that in a more dramatic way. You move me to the next slide, thank you. So what we've been doing on this sprint is we've had our alignment workshop, which was really great. We had a lot of people all working together on the Miro board. I think we're coming on to the detail of that in just a moment. But we've also got our blog finished, so that's on our website as well. And we've been thinking about how we can start to survey other authorities so that we can start to build our matrix of who has what systems and understand the challenges that we might face. And so alongside that, we've been thinking about the questions and the consent that we'll need to go through in order to make that happen. We've also gone back and looked at the service pattern and the system types that are in use for the partners, which has helped us get that understanding of the work that's already been done. And we've already started initial conversations and reached out to the suppliers that we as the partners are using at the moment. And we've had our first one today, which again, I think we'll probably come on to in just a bit. And that was with DRS, who is our scheduling partner. So hopefully we'll get the others lined up soon. I just wanted to add on there as well, if there is any questions, if we can keep those to the end, that would be great. Over to you, Neil.
Thanks. So to remind some folks who might not have seen it for a while and also set the scene for people who are perhaps new to the project, this is just a quick run through the prototype that was developed in the previous phase. There's actually two versions. I'm going to show you version 2, so I think it has a bit more to, a few more points to touch on essentially. This is where the resident or the person raising a repair on behalf of the resident would start. This prototype doesn't include raising an emergency repair or a communal repair. So I'm going to step through the screens and just talk a little bit about what we're doing. So I'm first prompted to enter the postcode and find the property. And of course, the repairs can only be arranged for properties that are maintained by the council. So this is a kind of eligibility check, essentially. Then I'm prompted to, this is a kind of set of questions that are around diagnosing the problem. Starting with where the problem is, followed by the type of problem. And of course, this relates to what speciality the person who would be fixing the problem needs to have, essentially. So let's say it's a plumbing problem for a minute. I'm building up a kind of order here that you can see on the right-hand side. Then I'm prompted to tell some more text about the problem, any more details I want to give, as well as a timeline. And to really, I guess, help the executives also upload a photo or video. Parts of booking the appointment that's important is to supply any information that the visitor would need to know, such as whether there's access restrictions, for instance. then choosing a slot for the appointment is, of course, a key part of the service. So the implication here is that this set of options is fed from a scheduling system in the back end of the service. Again, as part of the appointment, it's really useful and important to have a phone number of someone they can contact on the day. And there's a screen here to go over my contact details of the person who's raised the repair. And I'll get the kind of the summary of the order from the route that I choose here. Finally, I just review the options, and I can go back and change them if I like, and I can confirm it if I'm happy. I get given a repair reference number, and then the summary of the order is presented, and it might look a little bit like this. Of course, you give that reference number and pretty much all the key information from the appointment. So that's the service. There's some kind of follow-on links here that are kind of implied, but they're not prototypes, including changing the appointment and setting up a keyword for security. So I'm going to go back to the presentation now.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. It's Martin here from Unboxed. At the start of any project like this, we try and get as many stakeholders and the core team together in a room to get a shared understanding of the project and what it is we're trying to learn from it. Obviously, the room in the current circumstances is a Miro board, which you can see on the right-hand side here. We'd normally run through creating personas, mapping user journeys, maybe trying to understand the different stakeholders or the actors in the system. But as so much work has been done already on this phase, and this is a kind of a filling a bit of a gap in a previous phase, we spent quite a bit of time both before the alignment workshop and during the alignment workshop, just reviewing that material and making sure we all understood it and discussed it before we went into some activities. In the illustration you can see on the right here from the Miro board, the yellow post-it notes represent the desired outcomes. So everybody tried to capture what they thought would be good things to come out of the project. The blue post-it note, they're not really post-it notes, are they? The virtual post-it notes, the blue ones, are to do with who we need to speak to and what we might need to learn from those people. And then the pink ones are risks. We were all got in pessimistic mode and thought what could possibly go wrong with this project. There are some themes that emerged from that. I won't go through those themes right now because the next slide, Neil, if you wouldn't mind moving on, is really the kind of processed outputs from this workshop. So the biggest risks are expressed here as a kind of assumptions, and I describe this as these assumptions need to be true for this project to succeed on the grand scale. And ultimately, this is a technical feasibility project in the main. So the idea that we can integrate with multiple housing and scheduling systems to deliver a better end-to-end service is what we need to validate, really. That's an assumption we're making. We've got to talk to quite a lot of people to see if that's possible. The second thing is, and the third thing is really more about the viability of this from a business perspective. So obviously we need the participation of lots of councils to get this spread as widely as possible, this design pattern. Are the objectives of the project, or we assume the objectives of the project are a high enough priority for councils? And this is especially a risk, I think, in the current situation with COVID recovery. The third one really is around suppliers. We know there are a few well-entrenched suppliers in the space, and we're assuming that they will be willing to cooperate with us, to collaborate with us, and we'll have the motivation to make this change that we'd like to see. And the fourth thing is that any solution we come up with will be useful across multiple different councils. And obviously all these different councils are different size, different situations, and will have different needs. But our assumption is that we can come up with a solution that will work for everybody. So that's pretty much the output of the alignment workshop. A few other things as well, but these are the things that we're really focused on learning more about during the next few weeks. Thanks, Neil.
Hi, it's Michelle here from Unboxed. So as we're right at the start of this project, and we've kind of identified what are the assumptions we have, as Martin has just discussed, we kind of need to start looking at how can we validate some of those assumptions, make sure we're right about that stuff or wrong. And so we need to do some kind of research. So to begin with, we've been putting together a survey which we're going to share with councils. This will help us to understand how different councils manage repairs beyond just the partner councils that we're working with. But it will also help us, I think, to kind of recruit more people to interview as well. And the key things we're looking at with the council survey is understanding, one, kind of, do they outsource any repairs? If so, which repairs are they? Do they tend to be urgent repairs, or is it a mixture of urgent and non-urgent? And also whether they are generally using
the National Housing Federation schedule of rates.
And if they are, if they've expanded on those. So I'm going to touch a bit on what that is in the next slide. So like with any research project, there's always kind of a bit of admin to start off with. So we've developed some consent forms. This will just make sure that anyone we speak to is clear about how we're going to use what they've said. And it's just to make sure we're doing research in an ethical way. And we've started to create some rough discussion guides as well, where we've mapped out the kind of questions we think we want to ask. Of course, when you're right at the beginning of the project, some of those early discussions are kind of quite fluid, because you don't always know what you don't know. But we will refine them over time as we've had more interviews. And we're starting to get some interviews in the diary. So as Fraser mentioned at the start with suppliers, we have already spoken to one major supplier of a scheduling system this morning, but we're looking to speak to more suppliers, both who provide scheduling systems as well as housing management and contractor management systems. And we're interested in engaging with, the really big players, I guess, the large suppliers, as well as emerging new and smaller suppliers as well. And we are speaking to council IT teams to understand kind of what systems they're using now, how they've been set up, how they might have been configured and integrate with each other, or if they don't, and also what the internal capacity is. We know some councils will, might have quite a large IT team to support some of this work, whereas others that will not be the case. And we need to make sure that at the end of this process, we're considering the needs of councils who don't have that capacity. And so far, we've engaged with a number of suppliers, including that kind of big scheduling supplier. We've also spoken to a contractor in one of our partner councils about the system, the housing management system they're using at the moment. And we've also had a conversation with a developer who has worked on a similar project, because we want to make sure that we kind of share learning from work that's happened before. If you can go to the next slide, please. So I guess we've just had a few conversations, but already we've started to kind of see some emerging insights and given us some food for thought. So the first one is kind of, I guess, around diagnosis. When people report repairs, to enable that page that you could see in the demo before, where a resident can pick an appointment slot, for that to happen behind the scenes, there needs to be quite clear diagnosis. So, for example, I think the example was if you just say plumbing or it's an electricity problem, that actually could cover a number of different trades. And each one of those trades will have a group of operatives, and you need to check their availability. And that's why we're looking at how can we link to the schedule of rates, which identify what all of those trades are. But then also, you know, there was a lot of SORs, and we need to be careful about not, you know, making residents diagnose the very specific problem. So they might think they've got an issue with their boiler, but they don't know what that issue is. So we need to get that balanced right. Another thing is around filtering. So in one of the prototypes, it wasn't actually the one you saw, but there was another prototype that was developed that filters out some things at the start, particularly around urgent repairs. It basically asks, you know, is your repair one of several issues which are considered urgent? And then if it's not, it goes into the kind of reporting tool that we just demoed. And, you know, the reason for that is because we don't necessarily want somebody who's, I don't know, feels like there's a gas leak to, you know, report it online. That's pretty urgent. So it's very valid that they should call up. And then also about internal versus outsourced repairs as well, which is why we're going to include questions about that in the survey, because the outsourcing company might use a whole different system to what kind of internal repairs operatives used. So that's something else we need to think about. Do we integrate with those systems, or for this project, do we just start with kind of the core repairs that a lot of councils generally handle internally? On top of that, we've got some other information as well. Repairs operatives, you know, they kind of need to know the diagnosis. They need to know what, at least have an idea of what the repair is. But also there's some other background information as well that is generally passed to them from the housing management system. So it might be any cautionary contact flags. This could be, for example, if there has previously been somebody visiting a site and perhaps there was an aggressive resident, or they had a particularly feisty dog that they need to be aware of. But it can also be historical information as well. So a repair might be raised for, I don't know, it could be the boiler issue again, but that might have been dealt with 3 months ago and it clearly hasn't been fixed. And it could also be background information that the operative should know about, such as if there's asbestos known on the site and in the property. And so a lot of this information at the moment is kind of attached to a resident through the housing management system and through their account. And one of the principles of this service is that we shouldn't kind of make people register or log in to use the service. So we just need to think about how can we match that information? Could it be on the UPRN, the unique property reference number instead? And then lastly, other considerations that we heard about when we spoke to the scheduling supplier, you know, it's availability of the operative, but it's also things like, I guess, how efficient it would be to send a particular operative. So, for example, you know, maybe in the morning they're just working on a repair down the street, so it makes sense for them to then pick up that other repair later on. So travel time between sites is considered, as well as location. So some operatives might only work in, I don't know, the south of the city. Their availability in terms of whether they're working mornings or evenings, and as well as length of the job. Again, it's not always easy to know that up front because it does depend on that accurate diagnosis. But this is just kind of, you know, a lot of kind of different things that we need to think about and try and find a bit more about as we go forwards.
Hi, my name's Tom. I'm also working at Unboxed. Sorry, Neil, can you skip back to the previous slide? Thanks. So, as well as kind of the formal research we've been doing, we've also had a few introductory conversations with a few suppliers. So there is one provider of a standalone portal that we spoke to. So portals have got a few problems from a usability perspective, like forcing people to go through like sign up route and the like adds quite a bit of friction into the process. But having a conversation with them, they said that the product they have actually could work without a user login, which is kind of one of the main things that we need from our service pattern. They also encouragingly said that they'd be able to create a proof of concept based on the common service pattern later in the project. So that would be quite good to take a look at. We also spoke to a supplier of how they describe it, a field services platform, what we would call a contractor management and scheduling system. And they were quite interested in the idea of a common API. So we're going to set up some more conversation with them later. And then finally, we spoke to a supplier of digital platforms. They already have an online repair solution, but they're interested in evolving their product to use the common service pattern we've developed. And again, they're also quite interested in using the common API. Thanks.
Hi there. I spoke earlier, but I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Neil from Unboxed. I've just got a couple more slides to show here, and the first one is about kind of a data schema that we sketched this sprint. So this is about essentially categorizing the kinds of data that are supplied by the person raising the repair. So as you can see on the right-hand side, we've got kind of 4 categories we've identified, and these are roughly in the order that the user is prompted to enter this information. Starting with the property, then the problem itself that should be considered for repair. Then there's information about the appointment itself, and as we saw, that would be chosen from a set of kind of suitable or relevant options or time slots. And then lastly, there's information about the reporting user themselves. That's a much smaller set of information with just one field, or perhaps 2, thinking about it, their preference for how they're contacted. Just a couple more things to point out. The appointment code under the appointment, that's generated, of course, by the back-end system, and the same applies for the SOR code. I suppose the SOR code would be kind of guided, the operative would be selecting that perhaps. Then this slide is a kind of iteration, I suppose, on the sequence diagram that was produced in the previous alpha phase. On the right-hand side, you can see those same categories of data, and really this is just another way to present the flow of the user journey that we showed from the service demo, and starting with checking the eligibility, and that's all that inputting information about property, reporting the repair, followed by choosing the appointment, and then information about reporting the user. And the final 2 steps, 5 and 6, they're about sort of reviewing the order and confirming it. So we made these, and I see these as starting points for us to kind of get kind of map, I suppose, of which councils hold what categories of data in what system. So I think this will be this could turn out to be a useful way to find out the commonalities between councils and their sets of systems, including the housing management system, the scheduling, notifications, and the CRM systems. The final slide I wanted to talk about is fairly standalone. This is all about the Hackney Repairs Hub and its API. And I've included that here because we have the opportunity to talk to a developer on the Hackney Repairs Hub in this sprint. So I just wanted to draw out some of the key points. On the left-hand side of the diagram, on the right half of the slide, we see a user logging in. So this isn't a customer, so it's different in that respect from the service that we're looking at. Instead, this is someone who, this would be like a customer service agent raising the repair. Something that was interesting to note was that they use a custom-built app called PFAX, and that will generate then SOR code. So they're actually taken out of the Repairs Hub app to this separate application, and then they generate the SOR code, and then they need that to complete the works order. Kind of jumping over to the right-hand side there, that represents the kind of internal systems that are in use at Hackney. So we pull out a couple of details. As folks may know, they're using universal housing as a housing management system currently, leading product called DRS for the scheduling. And I was also interested to note that Hackney use the universal housing system for some scheduling functions rather than purely using the DRS system for that. So this is all about helping us to understand the landscape essentially. And in the middle there, you can see that there's an API which acts as a kind of intermediate layer between the various back-end systems and the kind of user-facing front-end app. Of course, it's really relevant for our project, because it's all about interoperability and kind of having a layer which abstracts away from the specific types of systems that we use at council. So we can really use this as a kind of model to think about ourselves.
Sorry, back to me again. So I just wanted to kind of round off the few things that we're thinking about. So currently the way that most online repairs services work, they integrate into the housing management system. And so create a repair order there in the same way that the contact centre agent would, and then things proceed in like the normal manner going through from there to the contract system through to the scheduling system. We're wondering if that's the correct way of doing it, and whether actually it might be easier in some respects to connect directly to the scheduling system and then start pushing information about repairs types back upstream. So that's one thing. We're also kind of wondering about use cases for the common API. So one of the issues currently is that because there's quite a variety of housing management systems and a variety of contract systems and a variety of scheduling systems, there's a huge number of potential combinations of systems in place. So for any new entrant into the market, it's quite challenging to kind of create a solution that will work easily. Hopefully, if we create a common API that can abstract all this away, we can provide a common surface to people. But then doing that is only useful if there's things that people could use it for. So we've been wondering like what potential use cases would be for that API. So we know already that there's an opportunity to maybe move like open source products that have been developed by one council to another council would be easier through this. Then we're also kind of thinking a bit more about what would things like IoT sensors on communal water pipes that can be quite easy to see, quite difficult to see. So you get issues where a leak happens, nobody notices for 3 months. If you could put a moisture sensor around that, would that then be able to tap into an API and make it easier to raise repairs? And so there's an opportunity here really to like kind of open up the market a bit and get more innovative solutions into the space. We're also thinking about the MVP for what a online repair service could look like. There's a whole host of repairs types we could choose from. I think if we try and build something that can work with every repair type, we'll get bogged down. So probably we need to work out a subset for it. What we're kind of thinking about at the moment is there, say, a top 10 or top 15 repair types, which accounts for 70, 80, 90% of all repairs raised. So we're going to be doing some analysis of kind of what repairs data we can get from our partners to look at that. And then finally is the original kind of goal for this project was to try and save money by reducing the number of calls into the contact centres. One final thing we're kind of wondering about is the best way to do that by diverting those initial calls to raise repairs by providing a really good online system, or is that too complicated? And actually, is it always going to be quite limited in the number of calls we can deflect that way? Would it be better to say we accept that most calls are going to be logged on the phone, but what we're going to do is provide a really, really good service providing updates so they don't have to phone in and chase up the status of their ticket. So yeah, a few things for us to think about, which we'll be coming back to later in the project. Cool. Next slide. Cool. So our next steps, we need to share the survey we've been working on with councils, and we'll be pushing that out through Twitter. So anything anybody can do to help publicise that would be much appreciated. We've got some more interviews lined up with suppliers and councils, so we'll be digging further into the things we talked about earlier today. We'll be going through more technical documentation, so particularly around like kind of the APIs, around a lot of the existing systems that exist, and kind of looking for commonalities between there. And we're also going to take a look at Hackney's report repair online service, take a look at the source code and see how easy we think it would be to kind of fork that. So if we do create a new report repair service in beta, rather than start from scratch, we can take an open source project and modify that. And I believe that is it. So has anybody on the call got any questions so far?
I think it was really good, just a comment, not a question, but really, at least, looking from a side, it just looks like you've done quite a lot in such a short amount of time. Just a quick question, I guess, on the survey. When are you thinking of sending it out, and how long do you think you'll keep it open?
So I just need to make some tweaks following some suggestions from Fraser. So I'm going to try and do that this evening, tomorrow morning, so we can start distributing it tomorrow. And I'm not really planning to close it anytime soon. So I will close it at the end of the project, but it'll be open for the foreseeable future. But the sooner we can get responses, obviously better, because we're hoping to use this also as a sort of recruitment tool. We have a question at the end that basically asks if we can follow up with an interview.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. So I think that's everything.
Lovely. Thanks, everyone.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Cheers, everyone.